Lyme disease is exploding in southeastern Ontario, and it could hit your family next. Ticks aren't just a summer nuisance anymore. They're invading backyards, trails, and parks all across the region, and cases are climbing at an alarming rate. Early symptoms can be sneaky, like fatigue and fever, or that textbook bullseye rash, or no rash at all. And if you miss the window of early treatment, you risk chronic, debilitating illness and pain. So why exactly is Canada's response failing patients who deserve better? Let's dig in.
Controversy in the Lyme disease research is a shameful affair. And I say that because the whole thing is politically tainted.
If you've been following the Lyme crisis in Canada, you know that it's not just a health issue, it's more of a national disgrace. Lyme disease is a bacterial infection caused by Borrelia burgdorferi, primarily spread through the bite of infected black-legged, or more commonly called deer ticks. One tiny bite can transmit not just Lyme, but multiple co-infections at once, like Babesia, which is a malaria-like parasite, Bortonella, Anaplasma, Ehrlichia, and others. These make symptoms far more severe, harder to diagnose, and much more likely to become chronic. So the United States, under HHS Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr., is finally stepping up and acknowledging this epidemic with real funding research of chronic Lyme or long Lyme.
Our goal is clear: reduce Lyme disease cases by 25% by 2035 compared to 2022 levels. Today, my agency is launching a major new multi-million-dollar pilot program that has the potential to transform how we prevent Lyme disease and other tick-borne illnesses in America.
And what's Canada doing? Once again, we're being held back in the medical dark ages, dismissed, gaslit, and in worst cases, offered medical assistance in dying, MAID, instead of meaningful treatment. Just days ago, RFK Jr. announced a sweeping plan, a multi-million-dollar tick control pilot, up to $2.5 million in Lyme X innovation challenges for awareness, treatment, better patient access, novel uses of existing medicines, and drug repurposing strategies, as well as better diagnostics, and specifically alpha-gal research. Alpha-gal is a fairly recent tick-associated condition that can trigger allergic reactions to red meat and other animal products. So while America is treating Lyme like the serious, often debilitating tick-borne epidemic that it is, with hundreds of thousands of people affected every year, here in Canada, we're in the dark ages once again, or perhaps even worse. You may recall the story that I broke a few years ago that Ontario's Chief Medical Officer of Health, Dr. Kieran Moore, has clear conflicts of interest on his file. Back in 2021, he disclosed being on Pfizer's advisory board for their Lyme disease North American strategy while leading Canada's Lyme Research Network. This is the same guy pushing public health policy, simultaneously working with Pfizer and their Valneva Lyme vaccine candidate advancing in trials. How can we trust impartial guidance when there's money and future vaccine rollout on the line? The chief advisor on vaccine passports in Ontario has a declared conflict of interest, but does anyone know about it? It looks like we have to file another access to information request to try to find out.
Have an honoraria from the Ontario College, and I'm on the advisory board of Pfizer for their Lyme disease North American strategy.
I exposed this years ago, and the silence from the likes of Premier Doug Ford and others in the establishment is quite telling. Mr. Ford, do you know that Kieran Moore has financial ties with Pfizer and he sits on one of their advisory boards?
Sorry, we're going. Thanks.
Mr. Ford, were you aware of that when you appointed Kieran Moore? Recently, viral videos have claimed that farmers are finding strange boxes full of ticks turning up in their fields, which is suspicious timing as tick populations explode and a new vaccine looms.
I'm not going to touch it because there's ticks all over that thing. I know there is. Look at them crawling out of it. Millions of them. You can see the tick.
While there isn't any credible evidence as far as I can see to support this claim, the pattern raises questions about what's really going on behind the scenes. And that's why I'm calling for anyone with photos, locations, or firsthand accounts of this to come forward and email me at tamara@rebelnews.com, because we can't ignore the fact that Bill Gates' funding for cattle tick research, that's genetically modified ticks to control livestock pests, paired with the rise of alpha-gal syndrome, that's the tick-triggered red meat allergy, forcing people off of traditional diets, sounds like a climate alarmist sci-fi dream. Scare people off of meat, push bugs and lab-grown alternatives, all of which, by the way, Gates has invested heavily in. So I guess it's all just a coincidence because, well, the fact-checkers told you so. And let's not ignore the origins of Lyme. Declassified documents broken down by the Malone Institute have sparked renewed scrutiny to Cold War-era bioweapons research and its possible role in the emergence of Lyme disease. Among the details, there are outdoor experiments involving radioactive ticks released in Virginia, field testing at Plum Island, located just miles from the Connecticut town where Lyme was first identified in the 1970s, and conveniently enough, reported CIA tick drops, just like the ones we're hearing about today.
In 1952, Plum Island was managed by the U.S. Army Chemical Corps as a component of its biological warfare program. And 2 years later, in 1954, it was upgraded to a Bio-Level 4 facility. Because of its isolation from the mainland and stringent containment facilities, it was viewed as ideally suited for such experimental research work. In 1953, just 1 year prior, the Biological Warfare Laboratories at Fort Detrick, Maryland, established a program to study the use of arthropods for spreading biological weapons agents. Did this research end up becoming a literal Pandora's box of bacteria-carrying bugs? As a matter of fact, the researcher who discovered the cause of Lyme disease admitted it. In June of 1982, Wilhelm Bergdorfer, a Swiss-born and educated American scientist, was credited with discovering the on-the-record cause of Lyme disease.
Researchers also point to the long-suppressed Swiss agent, a co-infection apparently sidelined in official records.
The Lyme disease spirochete is far more virulent than Treponema pallidum. We don't know the end yet. You can't even make a smear with Borrelia burgdorferi and see it as an organism. It's there, but you don't see it. You cannot find the spirochete. Why not? After all, I got a sick person here. He is trembling all over, has synovial fluid full of spirochete. But when it comes to blood, it's not there. So there is something associated or due to this organism that makes it different.
Willy Bergdorfer, the scientist who identified the Lyme-causing bacterium, privately hinted at deeper connections in his later years. While the Borrelia spirochete, that's a corkscrew-shaped bacterium capable of burrowing deep into tissues, joints, and the nervous system, is ancient, it's said that military lab activity may have amplified its spread and virulence. U.S. officials have consistently denied any link, but the pattern of restricted documents and unexplained gaps only serves to fuel questions about what really happened and how this epidemic really started. In Canada, sufferers like Stephanie Lavoie from Quebec battled for nearly a decade, lost everything, and then turned to the Liberals' medical assistance in dying after struggling without any reprieve.
Puis c'est moi là avec des démarches à un moment donné à l'étranger qui a envoyé des prises de sang et tout. Le fait que ça a été long avant d'avoir le diagnostic qui était pas là au Québec au tout départ, ça a fait en sorte que mon état s'est dépéri. De trouver aussi des spécialistes, un coup qu'on a le diagnostic, il y a pas beaucoup de personnes qui le traitent ici là au Québec.
À bout de souffle, vous avez décidé que vous alliez appliquer pour l'aide médicale à mourir. Pourquoi vous avez décidé d'aller vers cette voie-là?
Écoutez, c'est certain que ça fait 8 ans, que je me bats avec cœur, là, à vraiment vouloir que je retrouve la santé, avoir une vie normale, parce que, depuis mes 21-22 ans, que ça a été très hypothéqué. il y a été un moment que je pouvais quand même avoir une certaine qualité de vie dans les premières années. Mais là, plus ça va, plus je dépéris, moins j'ai de qualité de vie, mais je dirais que j'en ai plus, là.
In British Columbia, Lansticolis with Morgellons disease, it's a bizarre fiber in skin lesions tied to Borrelia, was gaslit as delusional and insane.
I started to get strange symptoms in my fingertips, of all things. What I didn't know at the time was that this bacteria that came from the tick is moving throughout my body, and it began to cause something that they call skin fibrosis. So the bacteria attacks the skin cells and it starts to increase collagen production. And I didn't know that. I just thought, I had calluses building up on my fingertips because of the outdoor labor. So that was my first symptom. And then that began to spread throughout my body. So I would get the sensation of bugs crawling in my skin, and I didn't know what that was. Then I began to get skin lesions, and I would be reporting this to my doctor, and he would just say, okay, just work on your hygiene, and so on and so forth. It just so happened that it took almost 3 years before I even heard of the name Morgellons disease. So when I was reporting these symptoms to my doctor, he was just trying to treat me with ordinary treatments. When that went on for months, and I couldn't go on living another day with this disease, it was that bad. But that being said, I was just hanging on for dear life. After months of that, I was referred to a dermatologist. That dermatologist told me, oh, you have dermatitis. He prescribed me a antipsychotic drug, and he said, oh, there's a special ingredient in there. I've treated people with your same skin disorder before. Don't worry, you'll be cured in no time. I went back to him a couple of weeks later, and I was getting worse skin lesions on my body and rashes, and he just doubled the dose. He secretly wrote a letter that said, I think this guy has a delusional disorder. I'm going to prescribe him these antipsychotic drugs, and hopefully his delusions will go away. And I should just note that this is, I would say, 9 out of 10 people who don't even know they have Morgellons disease, just like I didn't know I had Morgellons disease at the time, are treated exactly this way.
Scientist Marianne Middlevine's research shows that these aren't imaginary. They're linked to spirochetal infection. Doctors prescribe antipsychotics instead of addressing the bacteria.
Did have my blood tested in Germany, and they had a different kind of test. It also looks for the immune response, but it looks for a cellular immune response rather than an antibody-mediated immune response. So it's slightly different. And I was positive on that test, but in Canada, it didn't matter what test I had done, it was not going to be recognized. So I was pretty much spitting in the wind trying to prove I had Lyme disease. And it didn't matter what evidence I was able to pull out of the hat. It was just not going to be accepted here in Canada unless I reacted in a positive manner to that defective 2-tiered test that we do. Before the association with Borrelia and spirochetal infection was known, they were treated with antipsychotic medication. And the doctors believed that these patients dug the holes in themselves and then implanted textile fibers that they'd find lying around their house or from stores when they went to clothes shopping, that they believed patients would pick out all these little fibers and then actually embed them into their own skin. And then they believed that the patients were delusional in believing that the skin had produced these filaments. And that is totally incorrect. The filaments are produced by the human body, and they're hair-like structures. So they're generally collagen and keratin, and they're product of the human body. For those doctors with the point of view that it's delusional, they still are treated with antipsychotic medications. So, and then there's those doctors who believe the new evidence and they're treating it with antibiotics or, other other supportive therapies.
Sadly, I suffer from a rare parasitic condition called nastoma. It's a parasite that only 5,000 people to date have been diagnosed with. It only affects 80 people in the eyes. I happen to be 81. And on top of that, within the last year, I was recently diagnosed with relapsing fever and Bartonella and Babesia, which are all within tick-borne illness and Lyme family.
Patients are terrorized, isolated, and abandoned, and it's more negligence than care, I would say, at this point. Plus, the care that people do receive is all over the place, with doctors refusing extended treatments in some and then insisting on it in others. So while RFK Jr. pushes innovation and acknowledgement of these afflictions south of the border, Canada's bureaucrats cling to outdated tests, conflicts of interest, and denial. We need some real accountability on Moore's financial ties, his conflicts, real research that's not gain-of-function related, and treatment that actually treats, not just state-sanctioned assisted suicide for those suffering. Now, if you are suffering or you have evidence to any of this, please speak up, share your stories, and email me if you'd like to do an interview. Tamara, that's Tamara, at rebelnews.com. Canada needs to catch up now before more lives are lost to this denial. And don't forget to like, share, subscribe for more of this file and more unfiltered truth to help spread the word. For Rebel News, I'm Tamara Ugolini. To see more reports on what the globalist health overlords at the World Health Organization are up to, head on over to exposethewho.com. That's exposethewho.com.